And I just spilled hot coffee down my front. That's always a good way to start a podcast.
Do you have a drinking problem?
I have yes, actually. Between the amount of times in the past week I've, like, swallowed something down the wrong tube and had a coughing fit or spilled on myself, I'm like, drinking, like, I would not be surprised if at some point I, like, kill myself drinking. That's how I go out, drinking water.
They always tell you to drink water for your health, but sometimes.
Yeah. Sinister advice.
You know what? 100% of people who drink water eventually die.
It's true.
Wow.
It is true.
Wow, guys. I don't know if I can continue with the show.
Dropping hard facts.
You know who else drank water?
Rand?
Nelsian.
Oh.
Oh no.
This is such a sad chapter. I've been dreading the death of Nelsian for chapters and chapters and chapters. It's so
Which
sad.
is funny because he's such a he's a fun character, but he's pretty minor, right?
I
Like, he's one of
know.
Matt's flackies, right? Like,
He's just a fuckboy, but for some reason his death really hits me.
I mean, it's pretty brutal.
it is brutal.
Yeah, I think it's more the method of his death than the fact that it's him that dies.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
So let's start officially.
From speculating about the golem.
Yeah, instead of just bullshitting. Today we're joined by Collin from RandlandTVPod. You've been on before an episode, and we spent a lot of time hanging out at JordanCon, which was a fucking blast.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
It was great. So I was super excited to have you back on.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. This is a fun chapter. So I'm excited for the conversation.
Fun.
Yeah, and you do Randland TV podcast with Jay, who's also been on recently,
yes,
right after Jordan.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
Is there anything else you want to shout out?
What are you guys doing on your podcast lately?
What are we doing right now? Right now, we're kind of like in a transition. We're trying to branch out into doing more kind of live stuff on YouTube, so that we can kind of react in time, as it were, once the show comes out. So we're working on more video content. We've done like the Jeopardy, obviously. You guys were there for that. And trying to put out some more video stuff, so we're kind of ready for that transition. But yeah, so we're recording another episode probably in the next week or two. Jay's taking the helm on that one, so I don't know exactly what the topic is going to be yet, but I think it's going to be somewhat controversial, knowing Jay.
Good times.
Good. Someone needs to dig into that stuff.
Yeah, right.
What's your most controversial episode so far?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, probably, to be honest, it's probably the one we did like a year ago, which was Twitter Time, the Surdite in the Room, which was kind of like a commentary on like, we were commenting on like our responsibility as fans and as a fandom, kind of talking about a lot of things that had happened, some things that had happened on Twitter Time and what was happening kind of a year ago with the BLM movement, and discussing all of that in context of a fandom. That's probably the most controversial episode, but that was less like Wheel of Time focused. I don't know, the last one that we put out, aside from the recap of the con, was one that I kind of put together about consent and discussing a lot of the consent issues within the books, which I don't know if it was controversial, but it felt much more weighty when we were having the conversation than when we listened to it, you know?
Yeah.
But I think it turned out well. I was very pleased with that one. So,
well, it's definitely relevant to this chapter, and Matt's thoughts. So we just did Matt Festival of the Birds and all that kind of stuff. So Matt's still dealing with the after effects of Tylin's aggression. Shall we put it that way?
Yeah. And this is the chapter where Elayne is like,
right, where it's like, oh, actually, I hate you, Elayne.
Yeah.
Although I will say, and we'll get to it, but I do want to say, like, she laughs, but she almost immediately is like, I'm sorry, I'll help you.
Yeah, it's true. She redeems herself in like 10 minutes. But
and like there's that thing of like, hey, we all have a first reaction. I mean, I certainly have laughed at Matt for this one.
Sure, that's true.
I can see where your first reaction is to laugh, and then with minutes you turn around and are like, I'm sorry, I laughed. How can I help?
Yeah.
I realize this is not a good thing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess like You're absolutely right. Like, we all have first reactions. And I think even that in that episode we were talking about it, I mentioned when I first read these books, I had one reaction that was more kind of akin to Robert Jordan's kind of tone about the whole situation. But now that I'm older, I have a much different kind of reaction, to the whole thing. So I understand that. That's fair.
And Elayne is young, and her reaction changes almost immediately.
Almost immediately. You're right. That's true. That is true.
I wanted to give her some credit because we've talked about the fact that this like laughing at him is terrible. But then as I was reading through, I was like, but she almost immediately is like, you know what? I see that the reverse situation is a problem. Let me see if I can help. Now, she never does because of the whole bowl of the winds and fleeing and running away, and so she never makes good on the promise. But her intention is to intervene in what she sees as a problem.
Yeah, and she does talk to Nynaeve about it, so at least everyone on his team, so to speak, is aware of the right of it. Page. So right. There's that.
That's true. There's that. Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, it's still awkward. Especially when one empathizes with Elayne the first time around or so.
Right.
Then it's like, oh God. But yeah, you want to actually get us started?
I wasn't sure if I wanted to read the first bit of it, but there is, it describes Abu Dar and the holidays, basically.
Yeah, it's just walking through the streets, hearing the sounds, smelling the smells.
Chapter 38, 6 stories, and our symbol is the Dark Friend Faces, which usually the Black Hotjaw symbol.
Which is appropriate, because we have Black Hotjaw.
Matt would have gotten out and pulled the coach himself if he could. He thought they might have moved faster. The streets were already full with the sun not all the way up. Wagons and carts wending their way noisily through the crowds and wind-blown dust to shouts and curses, both from drivers and those forced to get out of the way. So many barges slid along the canals on bargeman poles that a man could almost have walked the canals like streets, stepping from one barge to the next. A noisy hum hung over the gleaming white city. Abu Dar seemed to be trying to make up for lost time yesterday, not to mention at High Chalestine and the Feast of Lights. As well it might, considering that tomorrow night was the Feast of Embers, with Maiden's Day celebrating the founder of Altara 2 days after that, and the Feast of Half Moon the following night. Southerners had a reputation for industry, but he thought it was because they had to work so hard to make up for all the festivals and feast days. The wonder was that they had the strength for it. Eventually the coaches did reach the river, drawing up at one of the long stone landings that jutted out into the water, all lined with steps for boarding the boats tied alongside. Sticking a wedge of dark yellow cheese and a butt end of bread into his pocket, he stuffed the basket well under the seat. He was hungry, but someone in the kitchens had been in too much of a hurry. Most of the basket was filled by a clay pot full of oysters, but the kitchens had forgotten to cook them.
Man, I just visited with my grandfather this last weekend, and he loves raw oysters. Yeah.
They're delicious.
So he claims. I have never tested it myself.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I love oysters. Raw oysters are great.
It's not a flavor, it's a texture issue.
It's a texture thing? I understand that.
Yeah. And that's all there is to it. It's like, it's not that I have had them and been like, oh, that's gross. It's like, that tastes good, but oh my God, it felt like eating a raw egg. You know?
Something, yeah. That's fair. I get it. I'll take yours. It's fine.
But I think it's hilarious that Matt's just like, the concept of eating them raw doesn't even occur to him. Like, just culture shock, right? Like, I love seeing these small farm boys, like, actually in the big city being like, well, I don't know how to eat this. Like, it's not mutton.
Right.
Yeah, no, he doesn't like lemonade. He doesn't like raw oysters. Like, there's just...
like lemonade.
Well, I mean, he won't even try it, right? Just like the oysters. Like, he's just like, I ate a lemon once and it was disgusting. So no, I'm not going to try a drink made out of them. It's like uncultured farm boy.
And we also get the series of holidays, which does help us time things, especially in the Path of Daggers, where we actually see those holidays. So like there's a sort of timing in the sentence, like we have the feast. We had High Chalestine, then the Feast of Lights, then the Feast of Embers, then Maiden's Day, then the Feast of Half Moon, and those are all occurring probably within, like, about a week.
Yeah. It's a party-filled time, which, again, makes sense because it's supposed to be winter, and winter is when every time you turn around, there's another holiday.
I'm kind of thinking of it like, oh, we've got Hanukkah, and then Christmas, and then, like, all the holidays that we have packed into December. Everyone's all celebrating them at the same time.
Exactly, because it's winter. It's dark. It's cold. You need reasons to eat food and hang out with people and light shit on fire. that's what the dark time is for.
It's never really that cold in Ebudar.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true.
Festival of the Birds, they're like running around and like it's like carnival, you know.
True. They're like, it's 60 degrees, it's freezing.
Yeah.
He's also got Bread and Cheese, which was the title of that previous chapter.
Yeah, he mentioned something about how they have 50 different kinds of cheese, all of them good, and I'm like, I want to go to Ebudar. I like cheese. Bring me more cheese.
Yeah, we had a debate about that when he was complaining about the bread and cheese, and we were like, oh, maybe it's like hardtack. And it's like, no, they have wonderful cheeses. Like, he's eating gourmet cheeses. He's not being starved out.
He's got like gorgonzola and brie and parmesan and like
French
Kalamata olives,
baguette.
like sourdough. Yeah. I'm definitely describing my favorite foods.
And raw oysters.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'll leave those for somebody else. So yeah, they're trundling along in their carts, in their wagons, carriages. I can use words.
This is a bit of a walk and talk, right? I feel like West Wing going on here. Like, as they walk towards their destination, there's just a lot of people sort of having different conversations. And we sort of check in with those.
Mm-hmm. You get the excellent line about like, but Nynaeve, if last night was as glorious as you say, how can you complain about skrrr?
Record scratch. Yeah, right.
Lan and Matt walk up and they like overhear the end of a conversation. And I love Lan's like his line, "We are in public, Nynaeve. Whatever you want to say in public, you may."
Yeah.
And it's just like, you probably shouldn't.
But you can.
But you can.
But you can.
So yeah, I love his reaction to it and her just like blushing about that. Because like we get all sorts of clues about what happened last night in their wedding night, but it's never stated straight out.
It's not. But you know, actually, funnily enough, I just made this connection when I was revisiting the chapter for these purposes. That like they had a Seafolk wedding, right? So like, and that's in the Seafolk marriages. At least like I don't know if it's a gender thing or if it's your role on the ship, but like the women like have like kind of like the control in public, but then the men, at least when we see it kind of displayed in the relationship that we see in the Seafolk, like the I'm missing all the terms here, but the mistress of the ships, and then she has like her right hand man who's like the guy who's like the master. Yes, exactly. So like she has like kind of like the power in front of people or in public, and then the role is reversed when they're in private, right?
Yeah, it's a rank thing. Whoever commands in public is subservient in private. So because in the Seafolk, they end up cycling who's ahead a lot, so they want to have it be balanced. If you apply it to Warders and Aes Sedai, it's a permanent
thing, because Aes Sedai are always going to have right the higher rank. So I know I just thought about that in the last reread. I was like, oh, that's interesting. If they've had this type of wedding, then I imagine those values are impressed upon them, especially if it was 12 hours ago, you know?
Yeah. And I think that like Keith in chat is saying, Lan is very uniquely suited to the Seafolk marriage vows. This works for him, I think, as a warder and as just himself. This is it works for him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it works for Nynaeve at first, but I think that she ends up really into it and okay with it. There are comments made in later books.
Yeah. I mean, I think it makes sense with her arc. It actually does make a lot of sense for me. So yeah, that's cool.
Well, and her giving up control. That's the whole thing about breaking her block, right? And that also comes with giving up some of the control in private.
Totally. Exactly.
And having to compromise, right? Like, yes, she can say whatever she wants in public, but then she has to go to bed at night with him, and then he gets to do what he wants and has his say, you know? So like there is this sort of, she has to
grapple with
the fact that she's not always going to be the one in charge, and while she is now.
Yeah, there will be consequences.
yeah, totally.
Caldric is asking, do we know if any of the Seafolk Aes Sedai have warders? And I can't recall if they do.
I think they're the Browns that hide in the library, so I imagine that they don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, I don't recall specifically because they're such background characters, but given that they are like the most isolated and like the most private, they probably don't have warders.
And also like not very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
By definition, like the Seafolks, and they're least powerful.
Right.
There's this funny thing where Matt is thinking that maybe he should suggest to Elayne that she like try to heal whatever's wrong with Nynaeve, because Nynaeve is acting so weird. because she's excited about being married to Lan and all of that. And he's like, you're acting really weird. Maybe there's something wrong with you. Maybe Elayne should like heal you. And then he says he avoided healing like death or marriage himself, but it was different for other people. You can't avoid death or marriage, Matt. You've been able to avoid neither of those things so far. Right? I mean, the marriage is coming, but like...
Yeah, we see him die at least once, probably twice. Yeah. And we see him get married once, so yeah.
And he's been living under the threat of getting married, like, for books and books and books ever since the first time he died, so...
Totally.
I didn't even notice that, like, choice of words, like, oh, I avoid it. It's like, do you?
Yeah, and you do occasionally let yourself get healed, very occasionally. So
right.
I don't think he ever gets healed after he gets the medallion. As far as I can tell, he never.
Oh, I think you're right.
Really?
As far as I can tell, every scar is a badge of pride where he avoided healing. He says that.
He probably has to get healed at some point, like on the way up to the last battle or during the last battle.
I feel like there was one point during near the last battle at which he got healed. I can't be certain. I don't remember exactly, but I feel like there was one.
Oh, they're bringing up the point that he had the medallion when the Dark Hound slobbered on him, and Moraine healed him.
But that's
she
how
had to be like taken off. But that's how he learns, right? I think from that point on, once he realizes what it is, once he knows it protects him, he's like, nope, no more.
But I think he has to accept it at some point, at least once, just because the last battle is so, like, I'm sure, like, I don't remember it, but I'm just sure that it must happen.
You don't think it happened?
Surely he must get healed, but I can't think of anything. Yeah, I don't think he gets hurt in the last battle. He's commanding.
Fair.
Yeah.
It only hurts her to his pride. I met the red flowers on the basket.
Yeah. So he gets the basket, and he clearly doesn't understand the significance of the flowers. But it's like having an advertisement for everybody out there, being like, "Hey, I'm sleeping with the queen."
Yeah, it's funny though, because Elayne is under the impression that it means that like he was forcing his attentions on the queen. Clearly that's not what the flowers mean, because why would you have a flower arrangement that says I was assaulted, first of all?
Right.
Yeah, I get the feeling that Elayne just doesn't contemplate the fact that the queen would want to sleep with Matt, so he must be forcing himself on her, right?
It's some sort of like bias there of like, well, she's older and mature and reasonable, so clearly Matt is just
manipulating her somehow.
And it's like, I'm sorry, she's a queen. That's like twice his age. She is in control of her own mind. Thank you.
Right.
But that's where Elayne has automatically gone to the worst case scenario for Matt. Like they just assume
assume the worst. Yeah.
Assume the worst. And I want to say it's all couched in their own morality of good women don't want to sleep with scoundrels, so he must be forcing himself on them.
And Tylin must be a good woman because she's a queen.
Because she's a queen. Right.
And she is not. Being a ruler actually makes you more likely to not be a good person, the record shows.
Yeah, that actually, psychology does show that. Being rich also, power and money makes you terrible.
Of course, that wouldn't apply to me, but everyone else.
No, you've already got all the power in the world, and you don't use it. We don't tell people that, but Aradia could actually like just take over the world like that if she wanted to.
It's true.
Wow.
It's true.
The restraint of it. Wow. How do you do it?
It's just a really long game.
Okay.
But yeah, so this is where I want to get into Elayne's comment, right? I will not keep any promise to a man who could force his attention on a woman, on any woman, but especially on a queen who's offered, and then he comes out with me, force my attention. What I want to say is like that is a little bit of a double standard for Elayne, where she's like, I won't keep a promise to any man, but yet she has no problem keeping her promises to the queen. And that's really where the double standard comes in.
I hadn't even noticed that. That she doesn't stalk out of the palace in a tizzy because the queen assaulted one of her subjects.
She says, well, I'll talk to her about it. Never ends up doing it. Yeah, but
she says like, that's very bad of Tylin or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Something pretty innocuous. Yeah.
And that's while she's like trying not to laugh is when she delivers that line. So yeah, it's yeah. And I mean, yes, Chad is correct that she didn't promise Tylin anything other than like telling her the truth, but still, like, you're not going to defend your subject in any way. You're just going to be like, maybe don't do that, and then move on. I mean, this is how rape culture enables people. It's because people are not holding each other accountable.
Yeah. And Elayne she is of a stature to be able to hold Tylin accountable. She's on her own land, but she is royalty, right? It's like she is, you know what I mean? She if anyone could say it to her, she could, you know?
Right. And this part about like, if you would force her attentions on any woman, especially a queen, like what does a queen have to do with it?
Sure. Yeah.
Like that royal bias, right? Of like, you know, like royalty is of a higher flesh. We're divine. We're special. We're more important. Assault on us is a more horrible crime. It's like, is it though?
And then I immediately think of the parallel with Valdo and Morghese, where he actually did force himself on a queen.
And part of the appeal of that was that she was a queen, because he's, you know, power hungry and all of that. But it's really...
Yeah, and Hanlon, who was...
who will be going for Elayne.
specifically wanted to go after Elayne because she was a queen.
Right.
Like, he wanted a queen. He didn't really care which one. Right? Like, there does seem to be a certain amount of, like, elevation of royalty here. I mean, certainly, with Elayne, it makes sense, right? She is royalty. Of course she thinks royalty is better than everybody else. The first thing she does when she gets in trouble is says, I am the daughter heir, you know? Like, that's her go-to, like, don't fuck with me, I'm the daughter heir. And I love that it never, ever works once.
Right.
People either don't believe her or like, oh, good, that means you're a better kidnapped subject.
Right, yeah. Please, tell me more about how much of a ransom I can get for you. But yeah, it's a lot of double standards. And then Matt literally tells her, like, the woman will not take no for an answer. I say no, and she laughs at me. And Elayne's immediate response is, like, muffled snickering. It's like, oh, you should try smiling different. I've heard that works sometimes. It's like, your friend just told you that he can't get out of this arrangement, and your first reaction is to say, well, good for you getting a taste of your own medicine.
Yeah, it's to mock him. Yeah, right. Which also, like, it's not the taste of his own medicine, because he doesn't operate that way.
Exactly.
Right. You know what I mean? It's not even...
It's the taste of what she thinks is his own medicine.
Right.
Because she has all this bias about who he is and can't see him for who he really is.
Right.
Yeah, the whole thing about have you tried practicing different smiles in a mirror is like, what were you dressed in? What were you wearing? Were you drinking?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
It's like, wow, go right to the victim blaming, Elayne. That's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, in fairness, like, she's probably never been in a position of being followed around by a creep because she is a daughter heir. So, you know, her awareness of the dangers that women have to deal with might be a little bit less because of her privilege. But even so, it's like...
And yes, this is all bad. But again, I want to bring up this statement that she says just a few minutes later. Now, admittedly, Matt does try and help her out, and there's some issues there. But she says, I'm sorry I laughed at you. Sometimes I forget my duty to my subjects. And subject is just anyone who's her friend. She calls a subject. She thinks that's a higher, I don't know. That's just her prejudice.
Andoran.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true. It's true.
You are a worthy subject. I will see that Nynaeve understands the right of you and Tylin. Perhaps we can help.
Yeah.
It never happens because of the Seanchan invasion. Because I don't think they ever speak to Tylin again.
They meet with the sea folk to arrange using the bowl in Tylin's presence, I think. But then the Seanchan show up like the same day or next day. So yeah, they don't really have a chance to talk to her.
Yeah, the conversation doesn't occur.
Doesn't occur. Yeah.
And Matt also is like, I don't know if I want you to say anything, kind of, maybe help, I don't know. And that's like where the conversation ends. So yeah, it's like Elayne does catch herself within a few minutes, but it is sort of prompted by him walking up to this person who just completely like gaslit and victim blamed him, and then is like, here, have this magic shield. And she's like, maybe you're a good person and I shouldn't be so mean to you.
Right.
Like, Matt, you should have
this
gone
thing I know you really, really, really want.
Yeah, Matt honestly should have not even offered. Like, I get why he did, but
Hey, editing Seth here. So it turns out they did talk to Tylin very briefly, but it amounted to pretty much nothing as she dismissed them. And he could have come at it a very different way. He's like, I can't believe you didn't tell me about blah, blah, blah. Like, how dare you? You know, you need this for protection. But he didn't throw that in their face at all. I mean, a little bit. He was like, oh, by the way, yeah, I know about Moghedien. But, but like, he didn't start with that. He's like, here's the medallion. You need protection. Right. Why do you need protection?
Yeah, he was walking up to them initially being like, they're going to hear from me about this. Oh, wait, lands at my back. I guess I'm just going to snap at Elayne, and then that doesn't happen. But yeah, he he is the bigger person by orders of magnitude in this interaction.
Well, right. And this is where what Matt thinks in his head and what Matt actually does are two very different things. He thinks in his head, fuck it, I'm going to come at him hardcore, I'm going to shame him, I'm going to do this thing, and he walks up and offers them the one thing they want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, Matt, that didn't go the way you imagined in your head. Yeah. And you didn't do any of the things that you said you were going to do. And just more evidence that when Matt says he's going to do something or thinks a certain way, he immediately turns around and does the right thing.
Yeah.
He is a confusing character to have opinions about in any direction.
But did you want to talk at all about like him handing over the medallion and her giving it back, and what, why doesn't she keep it? That's one of the things that
it's a weird misinterpretation of Gyuto, I think, because she's like, oh, well, there's not enough for all the women who need one, so none of the women who need one should have it. It's silly, I think. The whole like, well, I can't wear it if the other two don't have it. Like, this isn't a piece of jewelry that represents like the love of the dragon reborn for you romantically. This is a weapon. This is a shield. Like, but in fairness, she doesn't actually know really. I mean, she doesn't know that it's a. Well, no, she does know it's a shield. She engineered solutions around it. She doesn't know it can hurt the golem, but nobody knows the golem exists, so that's a fair thing to be ignorant about.
I'm gonna throw in maybe, and this is the ultimate kind of ace card, but like Tevirin. Matt needs it.
It's true.
Would she have been able to do would she have been able to accomplish what Matt did had she been in possession of it? I doubt it.
No, of course not. Yeah, no, because I mean, again, it was only Matt's luck, and we'll get to it, that has it fall out onto his face and lets him discover the properties of it, right? Like, if anyone else had it, they would have been killed with it just tucked under the shirt.
Yeah.
Right.
Although I will say, I think it is an incredible plot hole that when the golem doesn't burn just by touching Matt, right? Because any time a flow touches someone wearing the amulet, it gets canceled.
Right.
And so that should absolutely be applied to anyone who when the golem touches Matt, he should be burned because the power of the amulet should apply.
It's suffused through him, yeah.
Exactly.
I agree.
When Harry Potter touched Quirrell and Quirrell died, that didn't make any sense. However, I think it would make sense in this case if Matt were to touch the golem and the golem just burned wherever Matt touched him.
Sure, based on what we know. Right.
Because it's the cancellation effect that causes the burning.
Also, with Elayne, it's another good reason for her not to take it that she doesn't know, but that works, is that she wouldn't be able to... she would be able to channel with it, because this is the original.
This is the original.
She can't channel with the copies, but okay, never mind. Never mind.
I think the idea that a Terran Graal would prevent you from channeling doesn't even occur to them. Like, that doesn't happen. That's only a mistake when she's copying it. It's like that causes that problem. But yeah, and in many ways, I think it does make sense for her to refuse it and leave it with Matt, because ostensibly he has less defenses against channeling than she does, right? If Aes Sedai comes up and attacks the two of them, he has less defenses than she does, because she can also channel. So maybe that's part of her thinking too, is like, you need a weapon that works on the power, and you don't have that. So at least have this anti-power shield. Right.
And
it does. It kind of makes him a mini golem, right? He's almost as fast. The flows melt when they touch him, right? Like, there is a little bit of like, Matt takes on a little bit of the properties of the golem with the amulet, and that makes him the only person who can fight it.
Who can fight it, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Charmy in chat is saying they should have put the amulet on Lan. Yeah, the last battle. I mean, that is part of how he defeats Demon Tread.
Yeah.
and putting it on Lan in this situation wouldn't have helped, again, because only through Matt's luck did we discover the amulet actually hurts the golem.
Yeah.
In the future, give a bunch of amulets to Lan and Matt and Rand and have them go after the golem, But
it is sweet that Matt prioritizes his promise to keep them safe, to the point that he can swallow his pride and try to offer his one tool. And also the whole part about how Elayne is like, I have thought about stealing this from you because I want to study it so badly, and you're just giving it to me. Like, do you have any idea what I would do to get this to study? And he's like, just giving it to her for her safety. Like, he is a very protective person underneath all of his bluster.
Mm-hmm.
However, I would have loved to have seen them come to this conclusion earlier and work together, and maybe like, hey, why don't you study this for a while I stand here and wait? Like,
teenagers working together in my Wheel of Time.
The beginning of Abu Dar is one of the most frustrating lack of community. The girls forget about Matt. They literally forget he's there. And it's just like, that, they just dismiss him as unimportant, is what it boils down to, right? Like, and that drives me nuts, right? You need, one of the things I love about Elayne is she comes in and is like, fucking use him. That's what he's there for.
Yeah.
It is, you're right, it is extremely frustrating. And to a point where sometimes it feels contrived how much they forget him. But also it also feels right because they want to be Aes Sedai, and that's what Aes Sedai do, you know? That's exactly what they do. They're like, we're Aes Sedai, no one else matters. Like, what are you talking about?
It's so true.
So, yeah.
That hurts. It's so true.
It's true.
Yeah, it's got to be good Aes Sedai and ignore every single man ever.
Do it all on your own. But the thing is, they don't. Again, this is they're aping Aes Sedai behavior the way they think Aes Sedai behavior should be, rather than actual. Because Aes Sedai use warders all the time.
Yeah, but warders are obedient men, unlike Matrim Cawthon.
Right.
Yeah, and that's where Brigitte is like, you need to learn a little bit about the relationship between warders and Aes Sedai, because you do not know what's actually going on. So Brigitte educates them a little bit on that. But yeah, I mean, it's really sad how little they...
There could have been a lot less death and destruction if they had taken him more seriously earlier on. But we need death and destruction to make the plot seem exciting, so...
We get Elayne learning sheep swallow, and bloody buttered onions, which might be one of my favorite curses in the whole series.
Bloody buttered onions is kind of the best.
Bloody buttered... the alliteration on that is just really good. Yeah,
this is the chapter where she starts trying to swear, and it doesn't really work at first. It takes her a few books to sort out what swearing is actually, how it's meant to work.
What it's all about, yeah.
Yeah, which, I mean, is fair. There's a certain art to swearing correctly.
The next thing I have is crossing the river with all the women on one boat and all the men on the other boat, except for Lan. I couldn't figure out. Nynaeve is up top vomiting because she's seasick, and all the other women are down below, and I couldn't figure out why they're separated. Is it just the women giving Nynaeve some privacy with Lan? Like, I honestly couldn't figure out why everyone wasn't on the deck.
Yeah, I read that too, and I was just like, I don't know.
What was Nynaeve up to? The other 9 women on the second boat were all in the cabin, leaving the deck to her and Lan. And then they talk for a while, Nynaeve gesturing as though explaining, and then very quickly she starts vomiting. But, like, there's some conversation that goes on between her and Lan.
Right.
Guessing about Moghedien?
Yeah, the whole telling Matt about her.
Yeah, I think it's a continuation of that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, but why they all go into the cabin, I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's windy and they don't want their hair whipping their face.
I'm wondering now if it's a rank thing, because like it's Elayne and Nynaeve who are the highest ranking women of the women there, correct? And Elayne knows the situation between Nynaeve and Lan, so maybe she's giving them space, but the other women are they're kind of like, we'll let the Aes Sedai do her thing and we won't kind of invade that space. I don't know. Just spitballing here.
Well, there's a comment from Matt about how all the kin are clustered around Elayne like a bunch of hens following a chick. So maybe, all it took was one casual comment from Elayne, and they're all like, "Oh yes, Aes Sedai, we're going to go hide in the."
I don't know. I have no idea.
It's weird.
And then I love the contrast of Matt chowing down on food, being like, "That Nynaeve, what a pig." she's vomiting up everything in her stomach. He's like, teaches her for eating so much.
Yeah, it's funny.
The amount of hypocrisy in this chapter is great because we have a bunch of Nynaeve from Matt's POV, which is like a hypocrite looking at a hypocrite, right? Like,
right.
Mm-hmm.
So the layers of hypocrisy are just delicious.
I also noticed that Vannon gets seasick, which amuses me.
Oh, right.
It's always the really strong stoic characters that are like, nope, moving water, not okay.
I am, once again, even more convinced that Vannon as Damondred works so well in this chapter.
Oh my god, so many parts about this chapter point up to that Vannon dread, or whatever. Yeah.
Ignoring the reality of what actually happened in the books, I do think that Jordan was setting up Vannon as a red herring. That he was hoping someone would, like, think that Damondred was Vannon.
Right.
Yeah, it works. It works way too well.
And we'll get there. It's a little bit later, but there's some things that make me go, We see a little bit of Beslin concerned about trade wins, and that just sort of shows that he is, even though he's a party fuckboy, he is actually like concerned about the economy of his city and like has some knowledge about trade wins and commerce and how his city operates, you know? So it's like his worry on the ship is like the trade winds and commerce, you know, whereas everybody else is like, oh, we're going get this bowl.
Right, yeah, because, Matt is like, this is a storm, and Beslin's like, you ain't seen nothing. These are just the normal trade winds that normally bring commerce into my city. Like, this is fine. I'm not upset about this. This is not a storm. This is normal climate patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And this time, they're not bringing trade. They're bringing Sean-Chan.
Yeah, that's a different sort of trade. We will trade you death and destruction for taking all your shit. How about that?
But it does make sense why the Sean-Chan invade now, right? The winds have changed. And so they're able to use the trade winds to just en masse
swoop in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I like this comment as sort of like a little bit of foreshadowing of the storm that's coming.
Yeah, and then Matt's response to that is to start spouting off about the wheel weaves. And he's like, I'm such an old, reasonable person. This is awful.
Yeah, that was good. That was actually pretty funny.
Yeah, it's like, well, Tesla must be scaring me more than I thought if I'm thinking reasonable thoughts. Like, what is happening to me?
Here's a line I wanted to ask about. Maybe that was what he needed to clean the taste of sobriety from his tongue. Sobriety? Like, when was Matt sober?
Yeah, it's an odd choice of word. He means responsibility. He's conflagrating the two, and it's silly because he is still a child, whatever he thinks.
Gotcha. Basically, by being worried about exposing the women to a rough inn, he's like, I'm being sober. I'm being
right
sober in a mood sense rather than in a biochemical sense.
Right.
Yeah, he might be on a temporary hiatus because he still has a bit of a hangover from that night with Brigitte, but like he's not sworn off alcohol at all. And we get this comment from Beslin, like, what's the fun of kissing a woman without the risk she'll decide to stick a knife in you? It's like, okay, fuck boy. That's an intense way to approach things.
I mean, adrenaline's adrenaline, right? Like, if you really get off on that, like, kissing someone for the first time, that sort of, like, really exciting moment when you're, like, you don't know if they're going to reject you or not, and, like, you know, add a little spice to it. Knife point.
I feel like there's some intergenerational lessons happening at the Terrazin Palace that are hard to approve of.
Ding, ding, ding.
It's like assault is spicy. Like, yikes.
And I'll go back to the fact that we have the red belts. We have these wise women who can heal. And so maybe a knife, a little stab in the side isn't quite as bad as it normally would be, because you can go to the red belts and they'll heal you up, you know? And so maybe it becomes acceptable where, like, a stab for us is long-term disability and healing. For them, it's a trip to the wise ones.
So it's kind of like I have my COVID vaccine, so now I can go lick doorknobs.
Yeah,
it's kind of like that attitude.
Yeah. Or you can go hang out in large groups and party, right? Like, there's a certain, yes, it's dangerous, but there's a certain level of risk that you're willing to accept.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, in fairness, the culture of the city is that women will stab for fun. It's not only a self-defense thing, it's also just this is a fun activity sort of
I'm
thing.
bored. I'm going to stab you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because a red belt will just heal you. It's fine. I'm just playing.
And the men show off their scars. They're like, oh, this is where I pissed off my wife. This is where I pissed off my girlfriend. You know, this is like...
Yeah, it's true.
Working in kitchens, there is a certain amount of, oh yeah, this is where I cut myself that badly that one time. Here's where I burned myself. Like, there's a certain amount of minor injury that you kind of become a little proud of. You're like, yeah, I survived.
Yeah, I have a blacksmith friend. Yeah. He's like, oh yeah, this is where I dropped a big chunk of metal on my toe. It's like, you know.
And so I imagine there's sort of a similar record with, like, oh, this is where we had our first anniversary and had a fight. This is where, you know, like...
I
can imagine there's a similar, an unhealthy relationship. Like, I'm not saying it's good, and I'm not saying our world should ever have this sort of society in it, but here in Ebu Dar, there is a certain amount of, like, scars. They're
embracing their toxicity. Embracing their toxicity. It's good for them.
Toxicity in the city, in the city. Sorry.
That's hilarious. No, I understand what you're saying, yeah.
And then Nelsian, burn my soul. It looks as though I've dragged myself from bed for a dull morning. Nelsian, don't say that. Don't say that.
It's your last morning, Nelsian.
It's your last morning, bro.
Yeah. So they get to the Rahad, and we get a little line that tells us that it's still morning because morning did not really reach into the shadows of the buildings. So it's probably like 10, 11 in the morning, maybe even earlier.
I just want to follow up. Tasha did say that Matt has been avoiding drinking since the night with Brigitte. So he's been drinking tea while watching the inn. Remember, it was really bad, muddy tea.
That's right. Yeah,
that's right. That's true. So he's been sober for like 3 days.
So he is sober. So sobriety does mean like it's both.
Actual sobriety, yeah.
Yeah, Matt, go drink some ale or something. Seriously.
Some warm ale. Or sour wine. What I forget. Is it the wine that's really bad or the ale that's really bad in Abu Dhabi?
I think it's the ale.
I think it's the ale.
because it's too hot to really brew ale. Yeah.
Right.
I think it's the ale down there. That's like horrible.
Yeah, it's nasty.
Wolfing down the last of his cheese, he began on the bread and tried to ignore the dice in his head. An easy trip with no trouble did not sound bad at all. A quick trip with a quick departure from Abu Dhabi, which is just, I swear to God, that's Robert Jordan being like,
that's
guess
not what's
what,
happening.
fuckers? We're spending the next 3 books in this city.
Yeah.
A quick departure. He loves to prove his characters wrong, and in this case,
it's going to be the best Beltane ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. RJ's like, whatever I tell you, that's not what's going to happen because I am Matt.
We get a decent description of the Riyadh, the silted canals. It's sort of like everything's poorly maintained. Everything's falling apart. It's clearly it stinks. Yeah.
Yeah. There's flies. The paint is peeling. It's the bad part of town. It's the bad side of town, literally by a whole river. It's the bad side of town.
You know, we've got all this protection from these terrible things. We've got Lan, who's enough to protect everybody by themselves. In short, the Riyadh was sort of a place where anyone wearing silk could hardly hope to walk 10 steps without being cracked over the head, after which they best hoped to wake stripped to the skin and tossed into a pile of rubbish in an alley, since the alternative was not to wake at all. But, since they're going through Riyadh with 7 wise ones, children are coming out to give them drinks, women are giving them blessings, men are like bowing, you know.
Yeah.
It's described as this incredibly rough place that they just waltz on through, and everyone's very happy with them. So
because of the reputation of the red belts.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we've got Vannon sticking as close to Elayne as a warder, which again is just like, why is Vannon so close to her all the time?
Why would a Forsaken want to be near a queen? Have we ever seen that before? Ravine, maybe.
Yeah.
And then this is the line that really gets me. Oh, they glared at the soldiers as hotly as ever, even though the hardest flinched away from Lan after a single look. And oddly enough, from Vannon.
Mm-hmm.
How are you putting Vannon and Lan at the same level and not being like, maybe this is Demandred, maybe this is a Forsaken, maybe this is somebody who's not who he said. Like, all the things about Vannon, the fact that he's fat yet moves lightly, which we've only ever seen with Kylie. I've gone over this a million times, but like, you know, the fact that he puts himself right near one of the Taviran, which we only ever see. All the other Taviran, all the other Emmons Field 5, maybe not neat, but the other 2 boys and Egwene all have a Forsaken watching
attached
over them, attached
right.
to the hip. The fact that Vannon is treated as this badass that scares people, you know, but yet seems kind of silly. The fact that when he's in the battle, he is injured but not dead.
Yeah, and he's being singled out, kind of like how Dashiva stands out. It's be like, all the Ashaman can't do this except for Dashiva. Dashiva can do the thing. Rand and Dashiva happen to be the only 2 that can do the thing, and so it's like Lan is clearly not a Forsaken, but like Lan and Vannon, like how did Vannon become in that category?
How did Vannon get into the rebel camp in Saladar, scout the whole thing, and leave without a single warder seeing him? He had to channel. There's no way. This is the thing. He has to be a channeler. To pull off the feats that Vannon pulls off, he has to be a channeler, right? That's the whole thing. Like, he's not that good of a horse thief. He just compels people and like uses Mirror of Mists. That's my whole theory. Like, he's not actually that good of a horse thief. He just uses the power to fool people.
Yeah. It's amazing that the canon doesn't support this clearly correct theory.
Clearly correct. But like, it's just every time I'm like, oh, it's a silly theory. It'll go away. And then I come this, and oddly enough, Vannon. What? Why?
This isn't a silly theory. This is a really
It's not a
valid
silly theory anymore. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vannon's something more than he looks like. I don't care. Like, I'm convinced that the reveal was that he was going to be Demandred at the end. That's why he had the army in the South. He talks about having an army in the South. He has the Band of the Red Hand.
So you think like Jordan was like obsessed with like a Demandred like red herring? Like he lost Taim. Okay, people like guess that. Right?
Exactly. And so I think he was trying to create Vannon.
To find another one?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
This is after people call out Demandred, right? Because Demandred was basically Lord of Chaos, right? All throughout Lord of Chaos, we get Demandred. And then at the end it's super obvious, and like we spent the entire book being like, duh. It's very hard to read that book and not see Demandred. And then you get to the end of it, everyone called it out, and he's like, oh, maybe I don't want to have that person. And then he started writing up Vannon as an alternative. And no one noticed. I'm convinced. I'm absolutely convinced.
We need a Ouija board so we can ask him.
It's the only way
he would say
out.
that it's obvious, so
He's like Raffo.
Raffo
us. Oh my god, that would be great. You summon dead.
Oh, man.
Get a Ouija
That's
board. Get a whole thing. Ask this massive question to Jordan, and he just Raffos you. That would be just like Raffo.
Raffo, because it's reread and
Raffo.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
There's this great line about how all the men are growling at Matt's party for looking at the women, and they're growling at Matt too, and he's like, well, my eyeballs are never in danger of falling down the front of a woman's dress. I can look discreetly. It's like, can you know? Can you?
Beslin and Nelsian are clearly, obviously looking down women's dresses, but not me. But not me. I know how to look without obvious. Yeah,
I want to be surreptitious. Yeah.
You're not being surreptitious at all. They see everything.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And then Nelsian, what a pleasant walk with such interesting sights and smells. Didn't I tell you I didn't get much sleep last night? And then Matt replies with the fatal nail in the coffin. Do you want to die in bed?
Just in case you weren't aware that we were going to kill off Nelsian in this chapter.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I mean, in fairness, Nelsian would not want... It's like with Ruark when the wise ones are like, do you want to die old and fat in bed? And, that's why they sent him over the dragon wall. It's the same thing here. Like, Nelsian wouldn't want to live to a ripe old age. That's not actually what he wants. He wants to die violently, but...
Do we think... I can't remember if we speculated the wise ones knew that Ruark would die if they sent him over the wall and not live to a ripe old age.
I bet that they do. Yeah.
By sending him over the wall, they know he will die at some point due to the battle.
But if they don't send him over the wall, then all the Aiel die.
Yeah, then
everyone dies.
Right. Yeah. So there's like,
and there's much more G to die in battle than to go extinct.
That's true.
Yeah, and Ruark, even knowing, would absolutely have gone over anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, even without foretellings or anything, the odds of him dying are really high given what's coming. So, I mean, a remnant of a remnant, like all of that, like. You don't need dreams to tell you that the battle leader of the Aiel is likely to go down. But yeah, I do think that they know that he will either die in obscurity or he will die in violence. Like, those are his options.
Well, and that's why the Karakharn is such a conflicting figure in their mythology, because, like, yes, it means that you don't have to, be constantly tested in the threefold land anywhere, but but it means that most of you are going to die because of the remnant of a remnant thing, right? Yeah. Like... Mm-hmm. There is a little bit of sort of rapture, the idea of a rapture going on. It's like the Rand, the Dragon Reborn, right? The rebirth of Christ, right? Like there's a lot of analogies there that like this foretelling of the rebirth of the prophetic figure comes back, and then you have the rapture.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, waking from the dream sounds a lot like being raptured.
Yeah.
I mean, Tremalking, basically the whole. There's just a suicide.
Yeah,
quote, right.
That part is so just like. Yes, we need to leave this world. And even with the Ogier, like, we have to leave this world so we can come back. So that's a cyclical sort of rapture, right?
Yeah, and, like, opening the Book of Translation, like, what if the Book of Translation is just, like, a cup of poison wine, right? Like, all the Ogier kill themselves, right? We don't know, right? What if the translation is, like,
It's kind of like in Logan's Run where they all get like sucked up into the electrocuting colander. Bad sci-fi from way back when with terrible special effects. It's absolutely wonderful. If you need one of those movie nights, Logan's Run is excellent. Logan's Run. That's a weird, wonderful movie. It's a guy with a bunch of cats, all named after the cats in the musical. Anyway. People who know, and people who don't are not caring.
Me and Collin are like, interesting. Yes. So, well, first of all, they get to the building.
Six
stories, right? Like, yeah. So we finally, after a book of wondering, and I do remember on an early podcast when I was like, I can't remember how many stories there are, and someone's like, it's the title of the chapter. You know?
RJ makes it easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I remember searching desperately for which chapter is it that you find that out in, like looking through the whole book and not being able to find it. Like there was just this moment where I was like, I felt like such an idiot.
Well, it's okay. You then pass that moment along to me later, so you know the curse goes on. But yeah, Elayne is like 6, and Nynaeve's like 6, because they've been debating about it for so long.
Yeah.
And you know, Elaine's comforting Nynaeve, like, I wasn't really sure, like, you were right to be holding on to 5. And Matt's like, I don't understand. Can we get the stupid bowl? Moving on.
Right. Yeah.
But I feel like it's just more of Nynaeve being a little bit of a hypocrite, being like, no, I know it's 6, and being like, oh, do you? Or no, I know it's 5, and like, do you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, she has to admit she was wrong, because this is a debate she's only been having with one person, so she can actually handle admitting she was wrong for like 0.5 seconds. Yeah, and I mean, her and Elayne have been going over this particular question a lot. This isn't just any random like kinswoman or Aes Sedai. This is like been a bone of contention between the two of them. So
I do like that it's a building exactly like every other. You know, they had no chance of finding it.
Yeah, the only difference is that there's not laundry hanging off of it, which like not every building has laundry hanging off of it. So yeah, I mean, needle in a haystack, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it is the building that Matt followed a wise woman to. So he's like, independent confirmation that nobody asked for. Okay.
Yeah, he sends folks around to the back door. Maybe Moghedien likes back doors, but it's actually Samael who sends folks in through the back door.
Moghedien does like back doors. There's a very valid argument, but yes, in this case, it's not him. But yeah, it's hilarious when Nynaeve is like, everything's fine. Don't you see there's no need for your protection? And it's like, Nynaeve, shut up.
Shut up.
This is so necessary. This is so completely necessary. You don't know everything.
So as far as I can tell, there does seem to be 3 unique groups all converging at the same time, right? We have our heroes. We have Samael's goons and the Golem. They appear to be together. And then we have the Black Ajah, who are working for Moghedien. And I don't think the Golem and the Black Ajah know about each other.
No.
I just discovered something, though. This is when Nynaeve figures out that Lan told Matt about Moghedien. It wasn't on the boat. That discussion they were having on the boat was about something else. Because this is when Nynaeve goes, you told him, and they start getting into this fight and all that stuff. So I don't know what they were talking about before on the boat, but it wasn't this.
I feel like it's a continuation of the conversation about public and private. About like the conversation she was having with Elayne when they walked up, right? That's my guess.
Right. She's trying to like explain, like, I wasn't talking about the intimate of intimates. No.
Right. That's my guess.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that conversation got cut short and she would want to over-explain herself. But it leads to them having this amazing interaction where she's like, I'm not angry. Yes, you are. I will not be angry if you say so.
Nynaeve quivered. Don't take that tone with me, she shouted. I tell you, I'm not angry. Do you hear me? She shouted.
Yeah, she's so pissed.
It's not quite I won't shout at you, Nynaeve shouted, but it's close.
It's in that category. And I mean, also in this chapter is when she says there's no need to shriek like a cat, and then she shrieks like
Nynaeve
a cat.
Shrieks like a cat. Yeah.
It's literally those words, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But yeah, Elayne and Matt are both like, let's just get in, let's get out. Stop having this domestic squabble. Like, just stop. Vannon does his whole startling turn of speed despite his bulk. Nelsian leans against the wall and yawns ostentatiously.
I do like that moment though when Nynaeve is like obviously angry, and Lan is just kind of like quelling her, and then Matt says, blood Nash is naive. Like, he doesn't think you're angry. I don't think you're angry. Let's just move on,
Yeah.
Which is pretty good. It's a good line.
Totally. It's like, nobody thinks you're angry and naive. What do you need to hear? Do you need to hear?
Right. What do you need to hear? Yeah, totally. Let's move on.
And Lan is just like, I don't have the energy to be annoyed about this. I'm just going to be amused. Lan is so understated in his humor. And he's not really amused, but like he's kind of amused.
Yeah, totally.
But goading Nynaeve like works.
And
Nynaeve is like, I would have told Matt when I was ready about, telling him about Moghedien and losing his men. And it's like, so like in 30 years?
Yeah,
when were you going to be ready? You were going to put this off forever.
Forever, yeah, totally.
And it's not just about Moghedien, it's about like 2 of his men were killed. Like, you can't hide that forever, but she would have put it off until. I
mean, I think that's a Aes Sedai thing. That's something an Aes Sedai would do for sure. Like convince himself, like, well, I said I would do it. I just didn't say when. Like, or whatever.
Yeah, the moment just isn't quite right. I need to wait a little longer.
Yeah, totally.
Which, like, I'm definitely guilty of putting conversations off for months and months because the time just isn't right.
It's not right. It's not the right time. Yeah.
So yeah, Rat's like, let's go get the bowl, and then Phalion is like, indeed, we should do that, and all hell breaks loose.
How do the Black Ajah know where this is? Because they've been searching for the cache for a long time. Did they follow the group? Did they discover it on their own? How the hell was there a dark friend in the Aes Sedai? The one with the hood, who had her hood revealed, did she report back to Moghedien?
Saritha,
yeah. It's an S name, so you know who the hell knows. Like, how did the location of the Bowl of Winds get reported back to Moghedien?
Well, they've been...
And the Black Ajah.
They've been torturing wise women in an effort to figure this out. They hadn't succeeded when we see that happen, but they might have captured another one and tortured her and succeeded in the intervening days? Possibly?
It just always felt like a plot point, like a plot hole. Like, how do all of these folks converge at the same time?
Maybe it's noticing the procession heading through, and they just follow.
Yeah, I feel like they could easily have just noticed and just been watching,
Just followed the girls. Yeah,
because it's a huge procession. I mean, every single person in the Rahad is like at this procession, and it might be that the Black Ajah have been looking. They've been capturing red belts and torturing them. Like, if a procession of red belts is suddenly heading through the city, like, follow. It's not that.
But didn't they say like they tortured one and they're like, they don't know anything.
They've tortured multiple, and they think that there's nothing to it. But then Moghedien shows up and like sets a fire under their ass. Like, you will find Nynaeve or this cache or whatever, and like they're sitting in there being like, oh, what? There's a procession.
That's right. They were following Nynaeve because they thought we can take Nynaeve and give her to Moghedien, and that will get us back into her good graces.
Yeah, no, you're right. So they're following Nynaeve.
They're following Nynaeve.
Yeah.
That's my assumption, because like they were saying like, hey, we know Moghedien, and they say here like, there's someone who's will be overjoyed to see you when we take you back, Nynaeve. She thinks you are dead. That's clearly Moghedien.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But then my question is, if they're just discovering Nynaeve is alive, then they couldn't have been following her.
Maybe Elayne? Because Elayne is with Nynaeve?
I mean, do they think Nynaeve is dead, or do they just know that Moghedien thinks Nynaeve is dead?
Right.
I mean, you would think they would have corrected her, right? Like, clearly, Moghedien...
Would they without evidence? Yeah. I wouldn't. I'd be like, let me...
Well, because I assume Moghedien was like, I just bail fired Nynaeve. Like, she must have reported to them, and that was only... yesterday? So, Moghedien must have met with them yesterday.
Because that's what she was on her way to do when she bail fired her, was to go collect Ispan and Phalion and the others.
I just think it's a bit of a plot hole that they're there. That's all.
Just plug it with ta'veren.
Yeah.
Right. Obviously, ta'veren.
Yeah, we've got the magic caulk for plot holes, and it's called ta'veren.
And
like, yeah, and Samael's people were there already,
and they are with the gholam.
And they're with the gholam, and that's actually also why Samael gets a bunch of Terangriel. He gets a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, he finds like all the caches like around the world.
Right. And it's pure luck that they don't make off with the bowl. It's just because the bowl is like so many layers deep in the pile of trash
They don't know what they're looking for. They're
just grabbing whatever. So, but it's pure luck. I mean, like, they are technically 10 minutes too late to be assured of getting the bowl. But luck, Matt, that checks out.
That's his whole bag.
And then, so yeah, Matt feels that the power is being held because the medallion is cold against his skin. And the Phalian and Ispan don't realize the relationship of the wise women to Nynaeve and Elayne, and or the rest of the hired hands. They're like, oh, these are just people we can impress and scare off because we're Aes Sedai. And like everyone in the party is like, no.
Well, it's the Band of the Red Hand, which is a very different group than hired mercenaries.
Yeah.
These are loyal to Matt, and Matt is pledged to these women in particular, and he knows everything about their history.
And like Lan manages even to be effective here because he does what he did at the Eye of the World, which is just physically throw himself at the bad guys. He doesn't try to use his sword on them because obviously that won't work. But if you just hurl yourself through the air,
hurl your body,
momentum will take care of it.
Yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of when Rand is fighting the Forsaken in Farmatting, when he steps forward and uses the hilt to crush the guy's jaw. It's like he doesn't even draw it. He just moves fast enough that the other person doesn't have a chance. And that's something I feel like he learned from Lan, which is like, be fast. And sometimes that's more valuable than like drawing your sword, because the process of drawing your sword, it's too late. That's warning enough for whoever you're trying to go up against, right?
Swords require a lot of motion. They're big and long. Like,
throwing a dagger is a little faster.
Moderately, yeah.
Moderately.
And then there's this quick scuffle where the only reason that they succeed is because it's a narrow space and they can pull an Ingtar and, hold the odds. Even though there's only 2 of them really against, 7 or 8. It's like, but there's only room for 2 on 2. So.
And the 2 are Lan and Matt, which at this point are some of the most badass fighters. I mean, Matt, we saw take out Couladin, who was one of the best Aiel fighters, right? Like, and that was a while ago.
Right.
And now he's gotten all the memories and all the fighting ability and all that kind of stuff. And Lan, who's Lan, I wouldn't want to go up against them either, no matter how many people I had with me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then the channelers all create space around themselves so that they can fight, which is interesting how they're like jerking the various people out of the way without regard to friend or foe, just so that they can like have space to
have some space. Yeah,
to fight with their minds.
Elayne, yes. Yeah.
I feel like the Dark Friends are disregarding friend or foe. I think Nynaeve is only throwing away the Dark Friends, right? Nynaeve isn't knocking her own allies out of the way.
That's true, but the Black Sisters do.
Oh, absolutely, they do.
Yeah, totally.
Like throw one of their own guys into some of the other guys. It's like,
yeah, they don't care.
Like just spend your minions. It's fine.
That's literally Jordan being like, here's the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. The bad guys turn on their own. The good guys don't. That really does seem to be the moral line that he's drawing between these 2 groups. Well, yeah, Ispan and Phalian are the two Dark Friends who come walking in.
Yeah, and Phalian ends up in Camelin, subservient to Millie Skane and David Hanlon, while Ispan ends up captured and murdered with Adelius. That's what happens to those 2. And they are only part of the group of Dark Friends who are in Abu Dar, right? There's like 6 of them in Abu Dar, I think. So the other 4 end up elsewhere. Presumably they flee ahead of the Shan-Chan arriving because the Shan-Chan are bad news for all channelers.
My assumption is when Moghedien met with them, she sent them off to do things. So they have left the city at this point.
So these are the only 2 left.
These are the 2 that were sent to... Okay, that makes sense.
Right, okay.
So they're taking off out of the city that day also, yeah.
Otherwise they would have been captured. Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, that checks out.
Although I would love to go back and check and see like where they end up if we get any more information on the Black Sisters and do a little research on that.
Well, maybe they also end up in Camelin, because there's a lot of Black Aja in Camelin.
Right.
There's a lot of things happen in Camelin. But they don't follow the same route as Phalian, because Phalian ends up like underneath non-channelers, which is not generally how the Black Aja likes to conduct business. So they're fighting, and then a shrill scream echoes down the stairs because the gholam has just shown up, and Elayne is up there sending out the Matt signal.
I imagine they walked in on the folks stealing stuff and tried to stop them, and then the golem immediately turned around and started killing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so Nynaeve basically begs Matt to go up and deal with that, and Matt's like, "Well, she must be very concerned if she's asking me with the P word. That means that she's really upset."
Mm-hmm. Well, and she's going up against 2 linked channelers, Phalion and Ispan.
Mm-hmm. And trying to convince the wise ones, like, to help or something.
To help,
and
yeah.
She can't leave. She's a little occupied.
She's definitely occupied.
And her and Elayne are a good team. They can hold it down there. Like, Matt, you're the one that needs to go upstairs.
Okay, I was just looking at Ispan's strength, and she's like a 17-5. 5 being, 1 being the strongest, and 5 being sort of just 5 levels below the strongest of the White Tower. And they're both the same strength. So they're both, neither one of them is a top tier White Tower channeler, but together they are.
They're pretty formidable.
Yeah, I still don't really, I think Nynaeve should have been able to take them out pretty easily, in my opinion. I think even linked, Nynaeve is strong enough to beat them.
Yeah.
Well, it's harder when they're already started, right? She's on the defensive, and she's like startled and on the back foot, so to speak. So, I bet that has a lot to do with it. If they were ready, set, go, she could beat them easily. But being startled and not sure what's going on, she's a little bit not having an edge.
Right.
And she does end up, holding her own against them and capturing one of them. So,
Only with the aid of the wise women.
Oh, do they actually participate, or do they just cower in the corner?
That's the thing. She says, I can't do it alone. They're linked. If you don't fight them, they will kill you. And then Matt runs away, and later we see them win.
Right.
So the assumption,
when they come back, yeah.
And I always assume this is one of the reasons why the wise ones, we can control this one Aes Sedai. Maybe all Aes Sedai aren't the shit. And I think maybe fighting against her is the first step. Like, this is the first time they actually go up against Aes Sedai, even though they're black.
Yeah, they do struggle with keeping appropriate disrespect towards her later. There's the whole right. I'm so sorry, but also I'm holding on to you. And they do lose one of them, right? They capture both briefly, and then Ispan gets away. Or no, Phalion gets away. Remember, because that's why Nynaeve shrieks like a cat, is like, you hold that second one tight and don't let her get away like the other one.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the wise women take a little while to really get on board with the fact that deadly murderers need to be treated like deadly murderers.
You let her get away too, and I'll box your ears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're having that waffling back and forth that goes all the way through Ispan's capture and eventual death.
Right.
So yeah, Matt gets up there and bursts into a scene from Nightmare. And the first thing he sees is one of the wise women running towards him saying, "Help me," and then she gets caught from behind and has her neck broken, and it's this is where RJ gets really dark, and really horror elements are
that's a brutal death. Whenever someone's knows they're gonna die and is like, "Help me," and you're like, I'm just too far away. He was literally couldn't have made it to her in time to do anything.
Yeah, it's really it's horror. It's just horror.
It is horror. I'm actually looking forward to seeing this on television. Looking forward to seeing this scene for sure.
It's gonna be really, really stunning.
Yeah.
There's the sheer helplessness of them, chickens with a fox in the hen yard, right? It's that kind of just chaos where this person is just walking through calmly, killing people left and right, and nothing is everything's bouncing off of him,
So can I just say, I have found what I think is an error that makes this chapter unreadable. Just absolutely, we need to just, with a curse, Matt pulled himself out of the fight and dashed up the steep, narrow stairs, taking all 6 flights in the dark stair. There's 6 stories. There's only 5 flights of stairs. Right? Because first floor to 6th floor, you start at 1, you go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 5 sets of stairs for 6 stories.
Yeah, no, you're right. We should throw the book out.
This is just absolutely trash.
We're done.
Trash. It's only 5 flights of stairs. Unless you're starting in the basement.
Top floor is maybe the top floor is extra tall, extra tall ceiling, so it's got 2 flights.
But no, I thought about that, and I was like, on the 6th floor, you only go up 5 flights of stairs.
Right.
Somebody clearly, Harriet, you need to edit that better.
Yeah, Maria,
yeah,
continuity editor, what's going on?
What's going on?
Horrible editing.
So yeah, I mean, unless there was, because they're on the 1st floor, they're in the building. It's not like they were outside and there was a set of stairs up to the 1st floor.
Right. They don't have to like walk up the stoop.
Right. Yeah. So I can see that being the sixth set of stairs, but no, they're already in the first floor.
Sure.
There's no way.
It's true.
Yeah, unreadable.
It's done. We're done.
Well, this has been fun, guys.
I know. And this is where the podcast ends.
Yep. We're done.
No more episodes.
Yeah.
So everybody's dead except Vannon because he's the Mondred.
He's orchestrating the whole thing, right?
Yeah. And Elayne, but she's apparently dead, so, you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She seems dead.
Elayne not being dead seemed weird to me.
Well, I think it's the same reason why Vannon's not dead. The golem isn't actually trying to kill everyone right away. He's just flinging them left and right. I mean, there is the thing where he gets pleasure from killing channelers, so it is kind of weird that Elayne didn't get killed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
I guess just the whole, like, he plays with Matt, so maybe he, like, goes to play. He's, like, playing with he kills most of the channelers and leaves one or two to play with later.
Right. I mean, it is possible that he didn't, I mean, I don't know how, but that he didn't realize that Elayne's the channeler.
Or maybe it was just, a matter of, like, he's a predator playing with his prey. He's like, oh, she's stunned. I'll get to her in a minute. I'm going to knock the other ones out first.
That's true. She's not, like, posing a threat, so.
Well, and the golem says...
That's a good point.
He wants you dead almost as much as her. Is the her Nynaeve or is the her Elayne?
Right.
And who's the he? He is Samael.
He is Samael.
Yeah, he's Samael.
So I want to think that Elayne would be a more logical target for Samael, given the politicalness of how the Forsaken operate.
Right.
Moghedien wants Nynaeve dead. I think Samael wants Elayne dead.
Or does he want her as a prisoner? Which would be a good reason to not kill her, but rather capture. I just don't see why Samael would know or care about Nynaeve. Elayne has relevance because of being the Andorran daughter heir.
Right, but I don't see why he would want her dead.
Right, I could see him wanting her captured because queens and stuff. So that would be a reason to not kill her.
Yeah, it does seem to be Elayne from what I can read.
So capture makes sense. More sense.
Well, no, he wants you dead almost as much as he wants her. Oh, he wants her. He doesn't say he wants her dead.
Right.
He wants her kidnapped.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
So it's just he's just okay. That makes
and it makes sense too that Samael wants Matt dead because military strategist. Right.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. That actually makes more sense. So it's just he's just comparing the desires, not like the same desire.
He wants you dead as much as he wants her captured. But Matt doesn't hear. I mean, that line is in a minute, and Matt is just upset that he promised to keep Elayne safe for Rand, and also she's a woman and a friend, and da. So he just launches himself at the golem with no regard. And this guy makes Myrddraal seem stiff and clumsy, and it's so scary. And so basically Matt runs at him with the Ashendari, and dude just turns like a martial artist and grabs the Ashendari and pulls, which then flings Matt down the hallway and far away.
Can I just say something I realized? When they enter and he says, this is back in the beginning of the chapter, they enter the room and says, maybe Moghedien likes back doors, he said dryly. Something chittered in the dark end of the hall, and one of the men with Harnan cursed loudly about rats. I don't think that was a rat. I think that was the golem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. I had that thought actually as well.
I didn't notice that, but I agree wholeheartedly.
And so, especially later when we see the golem going out through the rat hole.
The rat hole, yeah.
So I don't think there's a rat in this. There's no food. Where will the rats eat? Like,
right, yeah.
It's the golem absolutely being a rat. So I meant to bring that up earlier, but that was definitely like the rat that he senses. Definitely the golem hanging out in the dark and chittering because he laughs. He's like
a creep.
He says, go check out the back door, and he laughs and goes to the back door to kill those people.
So yeah, Matt gets chucked down the hallway, gets up, turns around, and sees Nelsian come up the stairs, and is like, aha, we've got him now. And then the golem rips out Nelsian's throat with his bare hands.
That's rough. Because you had that moment of like, oh good, there's someone on the other side to help Matt, and it's just like, nope.
And you rarely see a death this slow motion and graphic. Usually RJ paints it over with big broad strokes. It's a battle, there's sword forms, but this is his hand shoots out to seize Nelsian's throat and comes away with a liquid ripping sound. It's like, are you allowed to do that in this prose? I was not prepared. I mean,
I mean, we've had You Might As Well, so we've certainly had some bloody experiences.
But again, that's big, broad, sweeping things. This is like slow motion. I swear the first time I read this, I had to go back and reread it. So I was like, you did not. You did not. I'm missing something. No, I'm not missing anything. Nelsian just got his entire Adam's apple removed.
I think he kind of has to, though, right? Like, I mean, Jordan has kind of built up this new creature that, like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to give something.
Yeah, totally.
You have to give something. You know what I mean? It's repelling flows. It's like, it's dancing around blades. You know what I mean? He's got to do something to show kind of how formidable this creature is, you know?
Yeah.
And there's something about getting your throat slit / having your throat ripped out where it's like, I see it in TV a lot where the person gets their throat slit and they have that moment where their eyes go wide and like, you know, and then they die. But like, there's that moment that's very horrific, and I feel like it's burned into our brains of like, when you get your throat ripped out, you have that moment of trying to breathe and knowing you're going to die, and that's horrific. You know, and we get that moment from Nelsian, and then we see his dead eyes once they hit the ground. Like, it happens very fast because you bleed out from your brain and all that kind of stuff.
But but his hands can come up and try to clutch his throat, and he's able to think about it.
Blood fountaining, and there's it's pretty graphic for Robert Jordan. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's beautifully horrific.
I'm into it.
I'm not normally, but like there are certain moments when I'm just like, the prose, it's got me. And then Matt doesn't really have a chance to respond to that because he's already hurtling himself at the golem. So he sees this, but his momentum's already carrying him in to this tangle, and the three of them crash to the ground, which is just
and two of them get back up. But it makes sense. Like, he's like, oh, I'm going to stab him in the back repeatedly. Like, he just killed them. Stab. Right? This bastard killed Vannon.
Yeah, and Elayne and Nelsian and who knows how many other people. I love that Matt is like, I'm stabbing you in the back. I have zero issues stabbing you in the back right now. He's an honorable fighter, but like, this guy clearly doesn't need that protection.
And what follows is kind of one of my favorite battle scenes in the series. Like, Matt versus a golem, the really quick hands, the back and forth, the knife sticking out of the side of the golem. I don't really know how deep to get into that battle because it's fun to read.
It's a good action
It's
scene.
a good action scene, you know?
And there's Matt thinking, where is my flaming luck? And the medallion's like, right here. I'm here. Yeah, it's so like the slow motionness of like the hands are coming towards Matt's face, and like the golem is underneath Matt, arguably in the weaker position, but Matt is like about to have his skull like crushed, like in Game of Thrones.
Crushed, yeah.
You know, and then the medallion just like slips out, and it's just the whole thing is so slow motion, and then there's this sizzle of burning flesh, and suddenly everything snaps back into normal speed because suddenly there is a weakness. Something will hurt this fucker.
But it's this desperation of like, knives don't hurt him, he's fast, he's strong, like there doesn't seem to be any weakness in the golem, which is what he's designed to do. He's designed to overwhelm and kill.
Yeah, I mean, he does the thing where he literally pulls a knife out of himself and throws it back at Matt. And I mean, any person, hero or villain, who does that is an absolute badass. Like when you take the weapon and throw it back. And then Matt catches it and is
the
like,
badass thing and catches it, right?
And you're like, great. And then there's no blood on the blade. Like, fuck.
Right.
So it's very back and forth. Like, who is going to win? Or is Matt going to die? Like, you don't know. Like, it just keeps flipping back and forth. Who has the advantage?
But I love the escalation because up to this point, Matt has been like any normal fighter at this point is just whatever, right? Any normal person Matt can take out on a one-on-one, and you really do have to escalate to make it feel like this is a threat to him again. Because channelers aren't a threat, fighters aren't a threat, like very little one-on-one
waves of fighters aren't a threat.
Right.
And Matt's about to bail from the whole situation because he's like, everyone up here is dead. There's no point in attacking this guy again. And then him and the golem both see Elayne move, and it's like, God damn it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's, I think what the golem is doing is forcing Matt to come to him. Basically, like, don't run away, or I'll kill this person you care about.
Yeah. Or capture her, which, clearly is going to be so much better. And yeah, no. So then Matt is like, promises, and immediately innovates how he can use the one weapon he's got. And he whirls the medallion on the cord, which is a very quick improvised weapon for him to come up with, but it works. But yeah, he doesn't want to walk towards the dude, but his sense of his promises and his sense of protectiveness make him walk towards the golem deliberately. And then Matt's thinking maybe a 6-story drop will kill this guy. It's like, keep going. You need to drop him a little farther before this actually works.
Yeah.
But it does remind me of how they do ultimately kill the golem. It is by falling, just more than 6 stories.
We see these people, the other men were streaming out of the door they had pried open. The door those footprints had led to yesterday, but their arms seemed full of rubbish. Small, half-rotted chests, a cask with cloth-wrapped objects bulging through the missing staves, even a broken chair and a cracked mirror. But one of the things we know is pulled out of there is the gold ring that Samael has and Grendel later acquires from his space. So the gold ring that Grendel has is it's an Angreal that's pulled out of the trash.
Yeah, because presumably there is I mean, when we see Elayne sorting through the panniers of garbage from here, she finds a lot of stuff. So presumably there's a couple of prizes in this.
Yeah, totally.
The other prize is most likely the oath rod that he gives to Savannah.
He doesn't have that yet? Oh. The kin literally had an oath rod and didn't know it. That amuses me.
Interesting. In Crown of Swords chapter 20, he offers Savannah the binder, but in Crown of Swords chapter 40, he gives it to her.
Yeah. So that would have been before.
No, well, chapter.
Oh no, that would have been it's like two chapters
away.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But he says when he's talking to Jacob Carradine that he has tracked a lot of these Terangriel, and he knows that they're in the city. So that's probably why he's promising it to Savannah even before he has it, is because that is one of the items that he somehow tracked.
I mean, he's also Forsaken. He can promise fucking anything.
Right.
Like, he's just give a fuck.
It's true. He's not bound to speak no word that is not true.
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of proof that the oath rod is from the stash, but that's the assumption.
I like it
because he doesn't have it. We don't see him have it before then.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, and they've got to find something here. It makes sense that not everything they find here vanishes into obscurity. Like, it might as well tie into further plot points.
Right.
But the golem bails pretty quickly once Matt decides to attack.
Oh, yeah. He's burned for the first time. Like, that literally for the first time in his entire life, he has felt pain. Right?
He's felt pain, yeah.
I'd run too.
Yeah.
Probably he could have beaten Matt.
Oh, totally.
But also, there was a first there. Like, do we want to push that any further?
Exactly.
Right. He's like, I need to regroup mentally and figure out how to deal with that. So he bails, and Matt immediately runs after him because Matt.
That's what you do? Right.
I mean, press your advantage, right? Like, if he's running from the medallion, make sure that he's gone. There's all sorts of other people that the golem could go after.
It's true.
So I think Matt wants to end the threat.
Right, but he busts into the room, and the golem had barred the door just to give himself that extra second to slip into the rat hole and slither down to the bottom floor and then go out the back and kill attempt to quickly kill a bunch of Matt's people as the rest of the Dark Friends run away.
I like the little foreshadowing here where he says, if Matt could drive him that far, maybe he could see whether a 6-story drop would do what a knife could not. It's like, okay, 6-story drop, maybe not, but drop into an eternal void?
Yeah, right.
Falling? You've got the ready to deal with falling.
Yeah. Yep. You'll get there. Get there.
Yeah.
But I just like he's already thinking about ways to kill the golem,
yeah.
and dropping him off a big tower is prominent in his mind.
Yeah.
A little bit of foreshadowing there.
I mean, that's kind of how Matt works, right? Like that's how we got the dragons, right? He started with in book 2 with like, oh,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And then he mulled over it for a year and a half and figured out how to create.
Yeah. Matt, the great escalator.
Yeah. Right.
And then when he's broken, he's the great stair.
It's true.
Sorry. It's terrible.
It is terrible. But that is your brand. So next, Elayne sits up and is like, hey, Matt, I noticed that you're an absolute badass. How hard is it to walk with those titanium balls you've got? And she apologizes for everything she ever did or thought, which is,
a lot.
Near-death experiences have that effect.
Yeah, right.
I do like we get the information that the flows do melt on the golem, which tells us like there's that cancellation effect between the medallion and the golem. It gives us information about like, oh, that's why the medallion worked the way it did, is because the golem is just like the medallion.
And it also is cool that line comes from Elayne, who is the ter'angreal engineer who ultimately figures out how to make copies of these. Like, she's already noticing the details you need to create that or to make something
do
new.
the thing. Mm-hmm.
Did she copy a golem?
Oh, God.
Ooh, wow.
That's a frightening thought.
What's the difference between a living construct and a ter'angreal?
Semantics.
Somehow there's will in the ter'angreal. Now I'm thinking of the Crystal Column ter'angreal that seems to have some personality and some intelligence and some opinions.
Yeah.
Maybe that is a construct just like Semeshta and the Green Men.
Yeah, it's maybe more like a supercomputer than an individual, but yeah.
Maybe there's some intelligence in that, in the same way that, like, maybe there's a continuum. Computers are advanced enough that they could actually become constructs and have their own minds.
Yeah, I mean, and it's all made out of crystal and quartz, yeah. Yeah, Elayne, don't think along these lines, please.
Yeah, I could see Elayne, like, justifying creating columns.
I need to study it.
Yeah, right.
No, this one will only go after the Forsaken, I promise.
Yeah, I built in 3 laws of robotics. It's fine.
Oh, that can never go wrong.
Yeah, never.
Oh my God. Who knew Terminator was one of the ages of no one knew.
I mean, it was the golem was like, ooh, that burned. I'll be back.
Yeah. I'll be back. For sure. And then Elayne is like, I keep building up toe toward you, but I'm not going to let you beat me. You're going to have to let me save you at least once to balance matters. And Matt's like, I'll see what I can arrange and walk away from this conversation.
Elaine's not misunderstanding of Jito, but applying it in situations where it doesn't necessarily apply.
Yeah,
like trying to assimilate it.
Yeah,
while also like holding on to her own. Yeah,
there's a little bit of Cha-Fa'il in Elayne.
Yes, which makes sense because she would absolutely be part of Cha-Fa'il if she was a Kyrian and noble.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it makes sense. She's being given a crash course from Aviendha in a matter of weeks about how Jito works. And we know that Wetlanders cannot pick it up in a matter of weeks. It takes a lifetime to learn what Jito is about. But it's not just a simple, like, zero-sum tit-for-tat kind of thing. It's much more nuanced than that. And trying to save your war buddy in a battle is not the same thing as, like, shaming them.
Yeah.
But I feel like there is that, like, I've saved your life X number of times. No, I guess not really. Like, we never see Aiel be like, I saved your life in battle, therefore you owe me.
Yeah,
right?
no,
like,
it's more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But he did earn he earned G, she did not earn To.
Right.
Right? Like, they are not interchangeable things.
Right.
Him launching himself as a killer is an honorable act. It just means that she has even less reason to be disrespectful to him. It doesn't mean that she owes him anything.
Right.
Light the Woman is definitely spending too much time with Aviendha. Well, and there's also, I mean, we headcanon that Aviendha and Elayne have some intimate relationships going on, right? So maybe there's a little bit of, like, trying to impress your new lover or your new friend, like, there's a certain amount of going overboard to impress the person you're with.
Right. I mean, even if you take out our headcanon, she wants to impress her future sister wife.
Right. Yeah. She wants to impress her regardless.
Yeah. There's a lot of reasons to impress her. When you want to impress someone, you tend to misunderstand what will actually impress them. Going overboard is like standard. And then she starts her first round of juvenile swearing, and Matt's like, despite how serious the situation is, what? What do you know what these words mean? Somehow they made her sound younger than she looked.
I feel like I've known those people.
I feel like I have been that person. Probably still am, honestly. And we get this note that Rianne is one of the few people who is knocked out, pointed towards the room. Almost everyone else was hurt or killed running away, but Rianne, who wants to be green, was headed towards because she's a green, and greens are badasses. And
Nynaeve does heal Rianne.
Yes. Yeah, she's beyond Elayne's skills, but not...
Oh, actually, no, Sumiko does.
Yeah.
That's the whole... Sorry.
Sumiko does, yeah.
Yeah. Because Elayne is just, like, basic first aid. Like, she can heal, like, if you're bleeding out, she can fix that. But if you've got a concussion or whatever, internal bleeding, like, no. Yeah, so then we've got the no need to shriek like a cat. You hold her tight, you hear me. She shrieked like a cat. We've got that fun, naive moment that everyone loves.
Yeah, and then after that, there's the healing, where Sumiko's like, apparently a much more advanced healer than even Nynaeve is doing. The one thing I'm wondering is, like, it seems like it's a pretty simple injury. What makes her more advanced?
I think it's not more advanced, it's that it's a different style.
It's different. I think it's the style. Yes, exactly.
So
it's the style of healing. Yeah.
Like that's what made Nynaeve so unique to the Aes Sedai, was that she was using fire and air, or fire and earth.
She was using all 5 powers.
All 5,
right.
Yeah.
So I think it's that Sumiko's doing the same thing, but with a different style yet.
Right.
And so it's like, because we know that the Aes Sedai's healing is just the basic triage battle medicine that lasted through the Age of Legends, and that's all they know anymore. So innovators like Nynaeve and Sumiko, they're figuring out that there's a lot of ways to heal, and the Aes Sedai are like, oh, wow.
There's that whole thing of like, once you learn a weave, you can't really learn another way to do it. Like you only learn that one way. So because they've taught everyone, they're kind of nullifying themselves. They're cutting themselves off at the shins because they can no longer learn another way, right? But these two have learned on their own.
Right.
Well, and I think what they were saying is the Yellows is this method is different enough that the Yellows can learn this way as well. It's not just like, I feel like they couldn't learn a different way to use the field medicine healing, but they can learn a totally different method of healing.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Basic triage versus like delicate surgery versus like, I don't know, plastic surgery. I don't fucking know.
Also, I feel like that whole it's hard to learn a weave related to a weave you learn just goes by the wayside. I feel like that's an early book thing that we just completely forget about as the books go on.
I feel like it comes up really occasionally and erratically, and it's not really relevant or helpful.
Is that really adhered to? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. It's like a way that RJ was trying to keep the channelers from being OP, but like he doesn't apply it consistently, so...
Or it might just be a white tower. They keep telling each other that, so they are stuck because all the misinformation.
Like you can't affect what you can't see or something like that.
Exactly.
Right.
For sure. I mean, and what you believe limits what you can do with channeling more than with most things. So yeah, their common lore hamstrings them. But yeah, I love that Nynaeve is like, oh my God, there might be somebody else to take the heat from the Yellows. Like maybe they'll leave me alone. If I can bring them Sumiko, they'll study her instead.
They don't really. It's not until she flees with Rand.
I know, but it's still a funny thought that she has. It totally doesn't happen, but it's funny. Maybe they'll leave me alone. It's like, no, they won't. You're still Nynaeve Almira, the woman who healed Stilling. Like an inventive kinswoman who can heal a little bit differently than Aes Sedai isn't going to distract them from you. But Sumiko's all like, forgive me. I know I wasn't supposed to, but I really wanted to, and also my leader's gonna die. Oh my god. And Nynaeve's like, no, it's cool. Don't worry about it. You're channeling in front of Aes Sedai. It's fine.
So she sends Elayne to go after the bull. Elayne is feeling kind of useless because she can't heal, and that's really what's needed.
But hey, she's the ter'angreal expert. Going into the room and finding the bull is a perfectly reasonable thing for her to do. That is in her skill set. And yeah, they come up holding the one Aes Sedai. The other wise woman come up holding Ispan, who's apparently all scared and crying and oh boo boo, I'm so not sorry for you at all.
Right. It's so funny how quickly like dark friends turn once they're captured. Specifically like the Black Aja, like it's from like lynx to like the meekest mouse, like immediately. Every time.
And what's so funny is the dark friends get captured and they almost immediately like give up and they never escape. Our girls get captured all the time, and they're like, "Oh, just another Tuesday. Like, I'm either gonna get rescued or get out. No problem." You know, like. I think again the difference between the light side and the dark side. The light side, someone gets captured, you go in and rescue them and help them. The dark side gets captured, you go in and kill them, so they're not a liability.
Right. Yeah, and also, I mean, there's courage versus selfishness, right? Like, selfishness is, like, the most important quality in a dark friend. That doesn't lend one to holding on to convictions or personal strength or having faith through the dark times. Whereas, if you have courage and you're like, I'm going to do what's right no matter what, then you're going to take a few licks, at least, before giving up. And so then the rest of the men come up. And Nynaeve has obviously healed some of them already because they have the bloody rents in their clothes, but are moving just fine. And Matt asks what happened, and Harnon's like, "Fuck if I know. Bad things happened."
We walked right into a knot of shoulder thumpers with knives in the dark. There was one who moved like a snake, and so that goes back to my comment earlier where there was the rat chittering in the dark.
Right.
that would have been the golem who then went in the back and basically was waiting to ambush them.
Yeah, and just kind of, I guess, shredded a few people on his way out. Didn't stop to kill them all. It was just like, as I walk through, I'm just gonna like grab.
I thought that was them walking in, not walking out. That they encountered them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, so he probably actually slipped out and just ran away.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, you're right. You're right. But I mean, can you imagine like how much worse things would have gone if they hadn't put some guards around the back? You know, like
no.
Our team might have
did the guards in the back do anything? They just got killed.
Well, I think they slowed down the shoulder thumpers, right? Like that fight bought a few seconds for the rest of things to go down. I mean, I guess
sure. There were fewer people in the space because of that.
Right.
Right.
They might have been ambushed more thoroughly if they hadn't had attacks on both sides. Always put guards on the back. That's just the moral of the story that I'm getting from this.
I do.
And Elayne is in the other room trying out some more curses, seemingly with no more success than earlier. Funny moments of levity throughout this horrific chapter.
I like Elayne is in the room coughing horribly because of all the dust and trying to curse, but can't really curse because she's coughing and the cursing is stupid. Blood. No, there's definitely a little bit of like humor as she's searching through all the dusty stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some good physical comedy to break up the horrificness of this chapter.
And then she finds the Bowl of the Winds, and Vannon/Demandred immediately tries to take it away from her.
Yep, I'm nodding.
As the Forsaken would do. Yeah, and she refuses because Ta'Veren, you don't want to give the Bowl of the Winds to Demandred. I'm never letting go of this, by the
way. I found it, Elayne shouted excitedly. She strode back out into the hall, holding a wide, round bundle of rotted cloth she would not let Vannon take from her. Coated in gray from head to toe, she looked as if she had lain down and rolled in the dust. "We have the Bowl of the Winds, Nynaeve." "In that case," Matt announced, "we are bloody well getting out of here now." Nobody argued. Oh, Nynaeve and Elayne insisted on all the men making sacks out of their jackets for things they rooted out of the room. They even loaded the wise women down, and themselves, and Rianne had to go down and recruit men to carry their dead down to the boat landing. But nobody argued. He doubted if the Rahad had ever seen as odd a procession as made its way to the river, or one that moved more quickly. We are noping the fuck out right now.
Yeah, we're out. Done.
Although I will say, in later chapters, he does talk about the fact that they insisted that everybody get loaded up with stuff. They didn't leave right away. The girls did assume that it did make everybody... They spent a while actually picking stuff up and putting it in carts and loading themselves up, right? And I think
it makes sense because there's a lot of shit that she has, like that she's sorting through. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've already spooked the bad guys. They're gone. So.
And we do see that, like when Avienda's actually sorting through all that stuff, right?
It's Elayne sorts through it, and then Avienda comes over and starts sorting through the good stuff and being like, "I'm starting to get impressions of this," but she doesn't. Elaine's the one that's sorting out like the old boots and table legs and stuff. Yeah.
And that's it.
That was a chapter.
The chapter.
I mean, we've been looking for the Bowl of the Winds. We found the Bowl of the Winds. It's such a, like... I'm actually, reading it, I remember spending longer than the Rahad looking for the Bowl of the Winds. I know it was most of this book, but it didn't start before. It was just this book,
Yeah.
So...
I agree with you. I think there are several points that led to that.
Yeah.
For me. Yeah.
The circus.
Yes.
When you actually read the circus, it's like 3 chapters.
Yeah, it's like not that much.
Yeah, it's not that much. And it feels like this incredibly long time. It's not that much.
Or even like book 1, like the road to Camelin, like the 2 boys like on the road. It's like, God, they were on that road for 8 books. Like, what the fuck? Like,
no, but it's like 4 chapters.
It's like 2 or 3 chapters. Yeah. It's really not that much.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 chapters with like another POV chapter in there somewhere, and it's like
yeah.
So there are these sort of long. Yeah, I've in the podcast discovered that these things that feel interminable are actually pretty short. There's just not a lot going on, and I think especially with the circus, we come back to it again.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The fact that there's 2 distinct circus sequences, for sure. And I mean, with the Rahad, you've got the first time you go to the Rahad, it's in the dream. And then you've got them trying to get to the Rahad from the dream experience. And so it's like it looms in your mind much larger than...
It actually was, right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think like I had one final thought that I've been kind of thinking about. It's like I feel like Robert Jordan he's obviously a very clever guy, and I'm wondering, like, the title 6 stories, like if it's not just about the building itself, but like if he's talking about like the plot lines or the things that are happening within, like stories, not necessarily stories in a building, but stories as in tales, as in like arcs, you know what I mean? I haven't really had anything to put a finger on, but I wonder if you guys had any thoughts about that.
My mind goes to, instead of sick, S-I-C-K, 6 stories. Like this is a 6 story.
Right.
I know
that. I mean, bro.
Yeah, 6 story, bro. But I don't think that's what he was going for at all.
Yeah. I don't know, it's just something that crossed my mind.
Yeah, there are a lot of different, I like what you're saying, there's a lot of different stories and arcs that come to intersect here.
Yeah, they converge.
I don't know if there's
chapter.
6 of them, but
right.
There's a lot, and
there's a lot.
Yeah. And it's so pivotal for like why characters are in Abu Dar and what happens after, and like the fact that the weather changes for so many of the plots. Like this is a very many arcs intersect at this precise chapter.
At this point. Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got Matt, the Supergirls, Rand indirectly because of the weather, the Kin and the Aes Sedai, the Kin and the White Tower coming together. There's a lot.
Samael and the Golem.
Yeah, and Jacob Carradine. And I mean, then the Shan-Chan show up at like the last minute, and the fact that the bowl gets used, and then the gateway explodes. That's all because of the Bowl of the Winds, and that influences how the Shan-Chan approach warfare in this continent for a while. There's a lot of indirect and direct things that happen there. Yeah. There's a lot. I like that 6 stories has a double meaning. I like that.
Yeah. I don't know, just something I was thinking about, but
Yeah, it's when she's learning how to curse for the first time, right by the blood and bloody buttered onions. Because it's like, no, I mean, yes, I mean, oh, kiss a flaming goat if I know what I mean. I almost wish you didn't know the truth. And then she says, I understand. It's like, what? What do you understand? I'm not sure what she understands there.
I feel like, actually, yeah, when I was listening to this earlier, I feel like she actually had like dissociated for a moment and was just stuck on absorbing the curse. And that's what she understood. It was like, okay, I got it now. And now I can apply that. That's how I took it. Like when I heard the I understand, I was like, oh, she's not even thinking really about what he's talking about. She's thinking about the fact that he just swore, and she's trying to absorb that knowledge, you know? That's the way I took it.
Because I always wanted to sorry, go ahead.
No. That's just the way I thought about it, but I'm curious as to what you thought.
See, I thought that it was like her saying, like, oh, I understand your discomfort and embarrassment with this situation, but I don't see anywhere in her life where she actually would, because apparently harassment is funny and or doesn't exist in this world, the way RJ set it up. Plus, she has so much privilege that hasn't happened.
Well,
so,
but this is where she flips, right? This is where she went from laughing to being like, oh, I understand, I'm sorry.
Right, but so what does she understand? Like, does she understand what it's like to feel embarrassed about having been assaulted?
Yeah, I think he's saying, I wish you didn't know. And she's like, I understand. Like, I get that you think this is embarrassing.
Okay, I mean, I guess in the tower, there is all of that embarrassment around being sent to the Mistress of Novices and not wanting the others to know you've been beaten, which is
yeah, I mean, Elayne knows how to be embarrassed. She's not, I mean, no, she's, just because you're royalty doesn't mean you don't know how to be embarrassed. When when information comes out about your life that you don't want to come out. Like, yeah. I feel like royalty in particular is very attuned to that sort of thing in terms of public image and communication and like private life. Like,
yeah. And yeah, I mean, she could also think she understands and not truly understand.
Yeah. She thinks that she's empathizing, but you know.
Yeah. And then, you know, Matt also is sitting there thinking like, well, how is she not mocking me? And it's like, Matt, give her a little credit. Like, yeah, okay.
There is the turn, right? This is the thing. Like, I do give credit to Elayne for, yes, her initial reaction was poor, but she does think about it for a second and say, yeah, that does suck.
Okay.
I understand.
Yeah.
You know, and this is after that sort of reversal on her part. So I reading this chapter, I am giving Elayne much more credit than I did in my head, because I remember her laughing. I never remember her saying, you know what, I'm sorry, that was wrong of me, and like reading that. And then I started the chapter that way and being like, yeah, she does turn herself around. Like, she does have an initial reaction, and then and this is something that stuck with me. Someone said, a lot of times your initial reaction is how you were raised. Your secondary reaction is who you are.
I've heard that. Yeah. It's how you've chosen to change yourself and respond.
Right.
Specifically around like sexism and racism and that sort of thing. Like, you are often, and I notice that myself, right? Like, I will often have thoughts and I'm like, oh, that's what my mother would have said. And that's my initial reaction. And then I have to rein that back in and be like, no, that's not what I think. I understand where Elayne's coming from, even if I agree it's wrong and you need to maybe rein that in sooner. But like, there is that initial, like, I have a reaction, and that's not necessarily what I would choose, how I would choose to react if I think about it for a second.
Sure. Right.
Yeah.
That's my only thing with Elayne, is like,
that's fair.
She was raised in a life of privilege. She has an initial reaction, and then she realizes that once it's explained to her and context is given, and she has that reaction, but she doesn't realize that Matt is unwilling at first. It's not until he explains that he's actually unwilling that she's like, oh, right?
Yeah. And then Matt doesn't give her even that much credit as you're giving her, because he's like, like, what is even going on? I don't understand her reactions at all. So Matt's not even thinking this through as well as you are.
I mean, to be fair, like, I don't know that he would necessarily be thinking about Elayne in that, like, he wouldn't care what she thought in that moment. He's more concerned about his own situation as far as that situation is concerned. You know what I mean? As opposed to like what Elayne thinks about it.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's tough. No, I mean, we have people not reacting appropriately in the first,
Yeah.
And then reactions to the reactions, and then reactions to the reactions to the reactions.
Yeah.
But what I do think is it's written very true to life. Like, I don't agree with what the characters are doing, and I can get angry at them, because realistically, people do this shit all the time.
Right.
And that, I feel like, is what the real masterpiece of writing is that, like, I'm so angry at these characters for their poor communication, and it's like, well, yeah, that happens all the time in the real world.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's like, it's the thing about, like, just because we're criticizing the characters that RJ wrote doesn't mean we're criticizing Jordan as a writer.
Right.
He's writing very believable, shitty things. Like, you wouldn't want them to all be perfect, non-problematic people, because that would be the most boring, unrealistic book ever.
Yeah, totally. Talk about a slog, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The golem really walks in like a one-man wrecking ball.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, the golem is scary and comes in like, hi, I'm super OP for even our OP characters. Like, now what are we going to do? Things have just escalated by orders of magnitude. And then he's lurking over the plot until Matt figures out how to get rid of him in, like, whatever book that is, many books from now.
Yeah, I mean, he is a little bit of Chekhov's gun. Like, why not send him after Rand?
Right. Yeah.
Because he's being controlled by a Forsaken that doesn't want Rand dead yet?
I mean, shush with the plot points, but like...
Yeah, no, Rand would be dead before he knew what to do. Like, because only Matt has, in the entire world, only Matt has a tool that can harm the golem. Though I do wonder if the true power... Oh, yeah. Wait, does she?
She has an Terangrial.
She has a similar Terangrial, yeah.
That negates...
Oh, yeah.
Right.
So I would assume that would also be effective.
He would just, like, dissolve if he came close to her.
Oh, no, she has Matt's Terangrial. She has the same a Terangrial that does the exact same thing as Matt's.
It's in her paralysis net.
It's in her paralysis net.
Oh, I was thinking of the one that makes the illusion
disrupts the flows. Yeah. Remember, just apply head on.
I wonder if the true power would be able to disrupt the golem, because he only is made of one power.
Right.
So like Moradin or Rand, once he figures out the true power,
would actually be able to affect him potentially.
Maybe. I don't know.
Right.
I say it's like a 50-50.
Yeah, that could be interesting, actually. Yeah.
Well, one has to assume the true power was involved in their creation.
Yeah.
Right? Agenor using the true power in Shale Ghul to create these sort of thing. Who knows?
Hmm.
We don't really go into how does Agenor create his shadow spawn, right? Like, what's the process? Like, he does it. He's this genetic scientist. He combines, but like, something in me wants to say it's so unnatural to create the shadow spawn that the true power has to be involved somehow in the merging of the souls of the animals and the humans. Maybe just once, maybe just that initial spark, but like,
maybe it's being by the boar because reality's rules are warpy when you're next to the boar, but that's kind of like a true power effect. Like,
yeah.
And like, what is the golem? I would love to speculate on that. Like, Trollocs we know are a mix of animal and human DNA.
I think the golem is considered a construct, like completely fabricated.
And like of the one power almost.
Yeah.
Okay. That's like Semeshta, right? Is also a complete construct.
Yes.
So yeah, I gotta think, and it's only 6 were ever created, which implies that they aren't able to like reproduce like organisms, right? So again, constructs. And I mean, golem, the name itself tells you this is an animated object.
Right.
It makes a lot of sense. But like the whole being squishy, I wonder what they animated him out of. Because like even Terran Real, there's a base something that you then
there's a base like material
that you then transform. So
maybe like a kind of list of ingredients that like made the ribbon that binds Fenrir in Norse mythology. It's a bunch of stuff that doesn't exist that I'm forgetting. It's like hen's teeth and the roots of mountains and the sound of butterfly wings.
Nice.
No, slightly more esoteric philosophical problems.
Yeah.
The breath of
a
fish.
Just out of mud. I mean, maybe that's
or just out of mud.
Where golem comes from.
Yeah.
The sound of one hand clapping.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not a lot of, or silly putty, like Chad is suggesting. I mean, maybe they had silly putty in the Age of Legends, and like, well, if we animate silly putty, then
maybe it's just borax.
But yeah, I think we've crossed the 2-hour mark. Again, thank you so much, Collin, for joining us and creating.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was fun.
And we'll see you about the interwebs.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?